Hello, my dears. Today we are going to put it all together. We've been talking about formatting your book, especially if you are doing it yourself during the self-publishing process. If you're working with a publisher, you can just completely ignore me, or maybe you want to listen and just sit back and enjoy the show. That's fine. But if you are doing it yourself, if you are self-publishing and you are attempting to format your own manuscript for publication, for final publication, typically most of what we're talking about applies to hard copy, but some of this does apply to ebook. Whatever platform you're using, you're going to want to pull their guidelines and check it out, see what they recommend doing or see what's required for you to publish on their platform. If you are using specialized formatting software, they're going to have different options for you, and you may not have as much flexibility with some of these things, or you may have a much easier time with these things than you do in Microsoft Word. So we've talked about all this in other videos, and today I want to put it all together and give you a basic checklist of the things that you want to confirm before, and decide on and confirm and do before you finalize your manuscript and export it as a PDF to upload on another platform, aka Amazon type of platform. So there are 8 things I want you to keep in mind and decide upon and manage and do before you consider your formatting finalized. And I want to start by first saying that these items may require you to go through your entire manuscript more than once. When I've done manual formatting in the past, typesetting, I've gone through manuscripts time and time again. Okay, this is not a one-time through situation, but these are the things that you want to keep an eye on and double check and decide upon. So, number 1, before you even jump into other things such as spacing of paragraphs and all of that, you want to decide upon your type size, or font type and font size. There are standards we talked about in another video, but determine what you want for both your body text and your chapter titles, your chapter headings, and make that decision first before you move on. So that's number 1, font type and font size. Number 2, determine what information, if any, you want in your header. If you want running headers, if you want just one, if you want no headers, and then determine where what goes in your footer. Where do your page numbers go? Are they left, right, center? Do they have any fancy design elements, etc.? So decide upon the content and formatting of your headers and footers, because as you start adjusting your pages here and there and everywhere, you're going to need to manually manage your footers and headers as well. Ensure that they're on point. So decide what you want them to contain and apply that formatting early on in the game. Next, if you don't already have it, you want to make sure that your paragraphs are justified. So turn on the justification format for your paragraphs. I don't know if every formatting, specialized formatting software might automatically do this, but that is the most pleasing to the eye because they are justified left and right. There goes my hair here. And what you're going to do is manually adjust the issues that come along with the justification next, okay? And again, if these items are automatically taken care of within a specialized formatting software, I'm not taking that into account. These are just the things I want you to look at. So turn on the justification. That's number 3. Turn on the hyphenation feature. That's number 4. In something like Microsoft Word, there is an option for you to say, hey, Microsoft, to avoid weird, like giant gaps between words, uneven gaps between words in certain lines, go ahead and hyphenate words at the end of lines if that can be done to avoid those wonky spaces. So turn on that hyphenation. And then what you're going to want to do is, number 5, is format your paragraphs so that they have a small first line indent. Some places say you should have 0.5 but I think that's a little big for a print version of a book. I would do 0.2 inches. Some places have other guidelines, so go with that if you prefer something else. But 0.2 is just a little bit, and it cues your reader's eyes as to like, oh, here's a new paragraph. You also want to set the spacing of your lines. Typically, it's not single spaced. Usually, it's more like 1.25. There might be a reason you do something different. Maybe it's 1.1, a little bit expanded, but set that spacing and then determine if you want to have any spacing between the paragraphs. That's typically not something that happens in a memoir manuscript, but that can give a little space between your paragraphs and help the readers understand where paragraphs start and end. The space between paragraphs is something that typically is applied when you don't have the first line indent. So think about what you prefer. That's totally fine, but it's standard to forego that spacing between paragraphs and instead do a small first line indent. Number 6, I believe I'm on. So once you have your paragraphs kind of managed, you want to, before you move on, make sure that your section breaks and your chapter breaks are in the right place. For some software, they will automatically start the first page of your chapters on the right side. So you will have like a blank page on the left if there is no content from the previous chapter that bleeds over to that page. You may not have even noticed that this is done in some books that you've read, but that's typically what is done. Sometimes you just decide that you don't want that and you want the chapter to start on the next page from where the other one ended, and that's totally fine. But ensure that they are all consistent. So you need to most likely enter chapter breaks, like a page break. As far as section break goes, you have some options here. You can select an icon, you can insert a couple hard enters, etc. There are a few ways to deal with section breaks. Whatever you choose, ensure that it's consistent. You also don't necessarily want a section break to fall at the bottom of a page. If your choice is between bottom and top, bump it to the top of the next page so that your readers can more easily, I think that's more easy to see that there's a section break at the top of a page rather than the bottom. So ensure that your section breaks and chapter breaks are in the right place. And then is sort of the manual process. This is what you need to do during the manual process of your manuscript formatting. After you've done all of those things that we've just discussed, that I listed out lickety-split, rapid fire at you, you want to go through your manuscript. Most likely a couple times you're going to do this, but you're going to look for what we've talked about before: orphans, widows. You want to look for those kind of weird spacing and gaps because of the justification. And you want to look for any stacked hyphens that need to be fixed. We've talked about some of these things, but let me give you a rundown again. Orphans and widows are where you have just a couple words from the bottom of a paragraph that dangle onto the either the bottom of a page or the top of the other page. So you want to, I guess I shouldn't say bottom of a paragraph. It's either the first line or the last line of a paragraph that gets stuck at the bottom of a page or the top of a page. You don't want one line hanging out by itself, although sometimes it is difficult to adjust that and not make it look weird and spacey in other areas. So that's why some manual adjustment is required. The spacing between justification, or because of justification, the spacing between words should be generally fixed with the hyphenation feature, but that might not do 100% of the job. So you are going to need to manually look at this, get your eyes on the manuscript and go through and make sure that the spacing looks pleasing to the eye and not weird. I like the word wonky for some reason, but you know what I mean. It doesn't look off. It doesn't look funky. To that end, because you've turned on hyphenation, you may have what we call stacked hyphens, which is like hyphen, 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 hyphen at the end of every row, every line in a paragraph, or half the paragraph, or half of a page, or whatever it is. That needs to be fixed. And what you can do is manually either unhyphenate a word and fix some spacing here and there, and typically that kind of helps the rest of them. But you need to ensure that there's no stacked hyphens. It looks a little off. It's not horrible looking, but it's not as fun to read a hyphenated word. And if you just have hyphenated, one after another, it's really going to disrupt the flow of your book. So double check all of that. That's kind of thing 7 on my list. Number 7, you just need to go through and manually make sure all of these things are in the right place. During that manual review, you may need to adjust headings. You may need to adjust footers. That's kind of the next step. What do you adjust at the last minute? Remember, if you are formatting your book, you are not adding content. So once you've formatted your book and you've put all of this in place, if you make any adjustments to the content, you have to go do all of this again. Double check nothing has shifted too much, so that you have to rework the paragraph spacing or the hyphenations or the widows and orphans and all of that, okay? You should already be done with your content. You also want to make sure that your front matter and back matter are unified in their formatting as well. They can be done within this process, but you may choose to apply something different to them. For example, maybe your dedication page is not justified, but it's centered, and maybe it's not standard formatted font. Maybe it's italics. That's fine. That's totally fine. Maybe your table of contents is larger or smaller for a certain reason than your standard font. Maybe you have a copyright page and a disclaimer that needs some bold font or whatever it is. So you have to go through and make sure that all of that is lined up. Make sure that your front matter and back matter are on the correct pages they need to be on. They shouldn't be bleeding into one another. They should be in, their own pages with page breaks and all of that. Give them the same formatting as chapter titles. Their names, their title names, if you will, note from author or table of contents, can look exactly the same as your chapter headings. They can look different. This one's kind of up to you. You can make the front matter and back matter look a little different if you'd like, but otherwise stick to standard formatting. And once you feel like you have everything in place, everything is on the right page, everything looks pretty smooth and enjoyable to the readers, everything is consistent, you got your page numbers rocking. You may need to manually adjust those, by the way, like if you have some introductory material and you want to use Roman numerals there, and then chapter 1 starts on page 1. You may need to do some special formatting with that. Again, specialized formatting software will definitely help you take care of some of this, okay? But this is for the do-it-yourselfers out there in the world. If you are managing all of this on your own and you are in specialized formatting software, or you are doing Microsoft Word, these are the things that I want you to make sure you are paying attention to so that your book comes out beautiful. Your final step, which is not in the list, but your final step is to print a test copy. Maybe that's just a chapter or two if you are not wanting to waste a ton of printer paper and ink. That's totally fine. But if you are printing hard copy books, please print yourself a copy for you to go through with your eyes on the paper and ensure all of this is done. That's kind of the last step, if you will, to print it out and eyeball it there as well. You can never look at your book too many times, but you can absolutely look at it too many times, if that makes sense. So we are wrapping up our formatting discussion. I hope that you didn't fall asleep at any point in time, because it is not the most exciting conversation. It doesn't get to the heart of your story, which is where the fun and emotions live. But formatting is important to think about whether or not you are self-publishing, traditional publishing, or doing something in between, and if you are hiring or not hiring, or some combination of the two. So we are going to move on to some other aspects of self-publishing. We're going to talk about cover design and all of that in more detail. So please stick around, and I will be back for more fun on self-publishing. I'll see you there.